Hello everyone, in this video I'll be guiding you through the install process of NoTrack. So NoTrack is a free open source application which I've been developing for some time. It is a DNS sinkhole which protects all devices on your home network from visiting, tracking, advertising and malicious websites. And it provides a DNS server, a log collector and a web interface. So you can run this on something as basic as a Raspberry Pi, which will easily cover a home network of Windows computers connecting to Microsoft's online services, which happens quite a lot during the day. So yes, I do get quite a significant number of queries on my home network, and the Raspberry Pi Model 3, which I've been running NoTrack on, has absolutely no trouble coping with the traffic volumes. And yet there's other features like analytics, which can try and find instances of tracking websites being accessed on your home network which haven't been blocked, and the processing is done on the NoTrack device. No data gets sent out. So I have provided an installation script, so you just download it and then install it. So it does have to run on Linux, and I've only written it for Ubuntu or Ubuntu based distros and Debian based distros. Compatibility with other Linux distributions may happen eventually, but well, put it this way, I'd really appreciate any input on that front. So I've written more of a detailed instruction guide. So there are a few dependencies. Something like the Ubuntu 2004 long-term support release will easily be able to provide all these packages which are installed by the installation script. So I'd highly recommend you have a static IP address assigned to your NoTrack device. I'll do that before the install begins. The process of installing with a Raspberry Pi involves using the Raspberry Pi imager, writing a copy of Ubuntu Server to the device. Then once the install is complete, you can mount the micro SD card, open up the file network config, which is in the system boot partition, and you can make changes to the network config. So you can actually set a static IP address at this point, and then when you first boot up the Raspberry Pi, it'll automatically apply all these changes. But unfortunately it's too late if you have not done it at first boot. Here is an example of the config which I've applied. So I've set a static IP address of 192.168.6.2. The gateway address is the router, and I've set a couple of DNS name servers, which is a Cloudflare provided service of 1.1.1.1 and the fallback server of 1.0.0.1. With all those settings completed, I've now powered up the Raspberry Pi and I'm going to connect across to it. I've already created a user account for myself, or more like I got Miss Quids to do this earlier in the day. And I've got a Raspberry Pi 4 here which I'm going to use, so the temperature is starting to creep up on that, but all I've got is a few basic heat sinks on the device. I've got no active cooling at this point, so I'm sure it'll be fine. I've seen them get a bit hotter than this. I've seen them creep up towards 60 degrees and still be absolutely fine. So I'm going to use this automated install script. So I'm going to paste that. So yeah, wget, and that's the install ubuntu.sh for me, which, yeah, that's correct. I'm using Ubuntu. And then we just execute the script. And this is how it looks. So welcome to NoTrack, and the current version is that at this time. Yeah, press any key to continue. Yep. Select the install folder. You can use the up and down arrow keys or select number numerically there, but yeah, I'm just going to go with my home folder. These are the initial settings that NoTrack is going to use, and you can actually change this later with the admin config. Put in a password for your sudo user, and this is going to install all the packages. You might see this error from DNSMask at some point, but that is due to a conflict of the stub resolver, which is currently occupied by systemd, but that will be resolved during the install. Yeah, there it is right now, so that will be resolved later on. You can't have two services occupying the same port. We'll get rid of the systemd stub resolver and replace it with DNSMask, which is a full-blown DNS server, which will be capable of resolving the IP address for any website you request of it. Although what will happen is there'll be a block list which will resolve the IP address of any domain in this block list to itself. And any lookups there will be sinkholed into a web server. So we're going to contain any queries to tracking, malware, advertising websites to the device and prevent any of these people knowing what you're doing on the internet. It's all part of a nice bit of privacy, and it's free, well, it's going to cost you a Raspberry Pi and a bit of time setting it up. But it's going to be cheaper than a VPN service. Although VPNs do have a different purpose, and I've detailed that in a video. They have a time and a place, but the way they're advertised is a little bit too much. Not everyone needs a VPN. Well, there will be an SSL certificate created, but you can't register an SSL certificate for all domains, funny enough, because you don't actually own them. But nevertheless, it will sinkhole what it can for HTTPS websites, although you'll be presented with a certificate error in the browser. There's nothing you can do about that, but it just means you can sinkhole both unencrypted HTTP and encrypted HTTPS. Ooh, PHP 8. I've not tried this yet. Most of my development has been done in PHP 7, so this is going to be interesting to try. Why is Ubuntu Server installing Apache? I've set everything up to use Nginx. The final stage of the installation is to run the NoTrack block parser, which you'll see a few errors, but yeah, that's because files that it's looking for don't exist at this point, but they'll exist soon enough. So yeah, can ignore all these warnings, errors, yeah, don't worry about them. We end up with a block list here of just shy of 18,000 domains. And a few post-install instructions, so there's securing the MySQL installation, reboot your system, and enable Dhcp. So to start with, reboot the system. Well, there's a problem that it shouldn't be using Apache, so I'm going to go ahead and remove Apache. So I think that's something weird that Ubuntu is doing. Sorry, I mean Apache 2. Yes, get rid of it. The little mistake for my initial setup was that I didn't put the new server name in /etc/hosts file. So that was my fault on the initial setup, nothing to do with NoTrack there. So got that sorted, restarted the Nginx web server after getting rid of Apache, which shouldn't have even been installed because I didn't direct it to. And now we've got the web server being accessible. Now I want to try out the NoTrack block list. So here is where the 18,000 domains end up, and that is in a file called /etc/dnsmask.d/notrack.list. And this is loaded by the dnsmask DNS server. So I want to test out one of the domains there, and I do like using 207.net. So I'm going to use the command dig, and I actually get the wrong answer here. So what I'm looking for is an answer going back to itself, and what I've got instead is something completely different. Now when I look at that, the server it's using is the default one, which I specified during the initial config on the Raspberry Pi. So quite clearly I'm going to have to change that, but I could just see if it's going to work by looking back at itself. So I just do at 127.0.0.1 and I get the correct answer. So clearly there is a DNS server on here, but this is going to be a quirk of the newer release of Ubuntu, I'm guessing, because this is Ubuntu 21.10. So from what I remember, the config is in /etc/netplan/ I guess 10 Raspberry Pi Internet eth0.yaml. No, not that. Cloud init. I'm going to try and change this because I think it's going to be the addresses. So I wanted to set it to resolve to itself. 1. And I'll go for rebooting the server. I would try rebooting the service, but I'm not sure which one that is there. So I'm going to go for rebooting the Raspberry Pi. So fingers crossed I'm going to complete the testing here, but then I want to look at directing the systems to use NoTrack. So we're going to set up Dhcp, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So this is a service that will exist on NoTrack, and it assigns an IP address to any computer connecting on your network, and it will tell it how to get out of the network, the gateway or your router, and it will provide it details of DNS server, which will be itself. Well, let's just try this dig 207.net, and I get the correct answer. So that was it. I was simply using the wrong DNS server. In this case, it needs to use itself, so I'll put that down to a quirk with Ubuntu 21.10. I'll go back across to the web interface and just enable DHCP, set the gateway IP, that is the address of my router, the range start, where do I want the DHCP range to start from, and I'm going to make it start a little bit higher up, I think. I'm just going to go for 96, but honestly it's your choice, your network, and having a lease time of 24 hours. So in future, all computers on my network will start utilising NoTrack, but at this point, I don't think they're going to rush to it. Yeah, I've got no devices found at this point. So this will be how it looks, and you can assign a static IP address to the system by ticking this box, set static IP address. You can give it a little icon here, provide its name, the IP address you want it, that's its MAC address. The MAC address is the important part for actually finding the device on the network. And that is essentially it. I'm taking a little look at the config. So I'm just going to go to DNS server. So NoTrack server name, I'm just going to give it the name, so that's going to be for, I'm just going to give it the resolving name, so it's going to be called Melina, that's going to be called melina.tzd for me, and set a DNS server. I'm going to keep with Cloudflare, but yeah, that's how you can do it, and you can set a custom one if you want. And the other things you can set, you've got the IP version, listening interface, the IP address, port numbers, page for the block IP, and number of days you want the logs to be retained for. So I'm going to lower that a little bit. Save the changes, and that's it for the DNS. And you can choose additional block lists, so select block lists. There's quite a few options you can choose from here, and you can add your own. Just go enable that one for the coin blocker list. And you can also add individual domains to your block list and allow list. That covers a lot of the initial setup of NoTrack. Thanks for watching, I'll see you all later.